18. The markets for factors of production. In this chapter, the following questions are answered. What determines a competitive firm's demand for labor? How does labor supply depend on the wage? What other factors affect labor supply? How do various events affect the equilibrium wage and employment of labor? How are the equilibrium prices and quantities of other inputs determined? Ask the experts. Immigration. The average US citizen would be better off if a large number of highly educated foreign workers were legally allowed to immigrate to the United States each year. 95% agree, 5% uncertain. Factors of production. These are inputs used to produce goods and services, that is, labor, land, capital. Prices and quantities are determined by supply and demand in factor markets. Derived demand. Factors of production are derived demand. A firm's demand for a factor of production is derived from its decision to supply a good in another market. Two assumptions are made here. One, all markets are competitive. The typical firm is a price taker. In the market for the product it produces and in the labor market, and that is factors of production. Two, firms care only about maximizing profits. Each firm's supply of output and the demand for inputs are derived from this goal. Example 1a, Xavier's popcorn truck. Xavier sells popcorn in a perfectly competitive market. He hires workers in a perfectly competitive labor market. When deciding how many workers to hire, Xavier maximizes profit by thinking at the margin. If the benefit from hiring another worker exceeds the cost, Xavier will hire that worker. Costs and benefit of one more worker. Cost of hiring another worker is the wage, which is the price of labor. The benefits of hiring another worker: the worker will produce and sell more output, increasing revenue. The size of this benefit depends on the production function, which is the relationship between the quantity of inputs used to make a good and the quantity of output of that good. Example 1b, Xavier's popcorn production function. There's a demand schedule with labor on the horizontal axis and output on the vertical axis. And that table is plotted on the graph. The marginal product of labor, or MPL. The marginal product of labor, MPL, is equal to delta Q over delta L. The increase in the amount of output from an additional unit of labor, where delta Q is change in output, delta L is change in labor. The value of the marginal product. Problem. Cost of hiring another worker is the wage rate is measured in dollars. Benefit of hiring another worker, MPL, is measured in units of output. Solution: convert MPL to dollars. the value of the marginal product is equal, VMPL is equal to P times MPL. The marginal product of an input times the price of the output. Active Learning 1, Xavier struck MPL and VMPL. Use the table given in example 1b, which shows Xavier's popcorn truck input and output. The price of popcorn is P equals 5 per bucket of popcorn. Number A, calculate MPL and VMPL. Fill them in the blank spaces of the table. Number B, then graph a curve with VMPL on the vertical axis, L on the horizontal axis. Answer. Marginal product of labor is the change in output from 0 to 30, the change is 30. From 30 to 55, the change is 25. From 55 to 75, this change is 20, and so on. And the change in labor is 1, so you divide by 1 each time. Xavier's production function exhibits diminishing marginal product. In other words, MPL falls as L increases. L increases from 0 to 1 to 2 to 3, and MPL decreases from 30 to 25 to 20 to 15, and so on. For VMPL, the value of the marginal product is the price times the MPL. So if the price is 5, then 30 times 5 is 150. 25 times 5 is 125. 20 times 5 is 100. The value of the marginal product is the price of the product times the marginal product of labor. The answer to B. Xavier's VMPL curve is downward sloping due to diminishing marginal products. Xavier's labor demand. Suppose wage is equal to W equal to $90 per day. How many workers should Jack hire? You plot the $90 into the graph, and Jack should hire 3. At any smaller L, smaller than 3, increase profit by hiring another worker. So if you're at 2, hire the third person. At any larger L, in other words, say at 4, increase profit by hiring 1 fewer worker. So in other words, if you are at 4, reduce labor to 3. In other words, the hiring is going to be at 3, where the wage rate, which is $90, is equal to the value of the marginal product, that point of intersection. For any competitive profit maximizing firm, to maximize profits, hire workers up to the point where the VMPL is equal to the wage rate. The VMPL curve is the labor demand curve. What causes the labor demand curve to shift? Changes in the output price, P. An increase in P increases VMPL. That is P times MPL, which is the demand curve. Advances in technology affects MPL. Increases in MPL, increasing the demand for labor and shifting the labor demand curve to the right. The supply of other factors of production affects MPL. For your information, input demand and output supply. Marginal cost, MC, that is the cost of producing an additional unit of output. So MC is equal to delta TC over delta Q, where TC is equal to or is the total cost. In general, MC is equal to W over MPL. To produce additional output, hire more labor. As L rises, MPL falls, causing W over MPL to rise, causing MC to rise. Diminishing marginal product and increasing marginal cost are two sides of the same coin. The competitive firms rule for demanding labor, P times MPL is equal to W. Divide both sides by MPL, and that would be P equals W over MPL. Substitute MC equals W over MPL from previous side, where P equals MC. This is the competitive firm's rule for supplying outputs. Hence, input demand and output supply are two sides of the same coin. The supply of labor. Trade-off between work and leisure. More time you spend working, there is less time you have for leisure. So there is a trade-off. The wage is the opportunity cost of leisure. When wage increases, the opportunity cost of enjoying leisure also goes up. Labor supply upsloping. An increase in wage rate is an increase in the opportunity cost of leisure. People respond by taking less leisure and by working more. If wage rate goes from W1 to W2, more people will provide labor from L1 to L2. What causes labor supply curve to shift? The labor supply curve shifts whenever people change the amount they want to work at a given wage. Changes in tastes or attitudes towards work, changes in alternative opportunities, immigration, movement of workers from region to region or country to country. Ask the experts. Migration. The average US citizen would be better off if a large number of low-skilled foreign workers are legally allowed to enter the US each year. What do economists say? 63% agree, 10% disagree, 27% are uncertain. Equilibrium in the labor market. Wage adjusts to balance supply and demand for labor. The wage always equals the value of the marginal product of labor. So D, which is the value of the marginal products of labor, and the supply of labor at equilibrium at W1, L1 will be higher. Any event that changes supply or demand for labor must change the equilibrium wage and the VMPL by the same amount. Active learning 2, changes in labor market equilibrium. In each of the following scenarios, use a diagram of the market for domestic auto workers to find the effects on their wage and employment. Number A, baby boomers who worked in the auto industry retire. Number B, car buyers' preferences shift towards imported autos. Number C, technological progress boosts productivity in the auto manufacturing industry. Active learning 2, answer A. The market for auto workers. The retirement of baby boomer auto workers shift supply and demand to the left from S1 to S2. W rises and L falls. So supply of labor shifts to the left, wages go up from W1 to W2, and number of people working decline from L1 to L2. B, the market for auto workers, a fall in the demand for US auto workers. At each L, VMPL falls, hence a left shift of the demand from D1 to D2. So labor demand curve shifts left. W and L both fall, so wages go from W1 to W2, and hiring, number of people working falls from L1 to L2. C. At each L, MPL rises due to technological progress. That means VMPL rises, labor demand shifts to the right from D1 to D2. Wages will rise from W1 to W2, and hiring will increase from L1 to L2. Productivity and wage growth in the United States. Recall one of the 10 principles. A country's standard of living depends on its ability to produce goods and services. Our theory implies wages tied to labor productivity. That is, W is equal to VMPL. We see this in the data also. FYI, monopsony. Monopsony is a market with one buyer. A monopsony employer can use its market power to increase its profits by paying lower wages. As with monopoly, economic activity under monopsony is below the socially optimal level, causing a deadweight loss. Monopsonies are rare in the real world. Land and capital. With land and capital, we must distinguish between purchase price and rental price. Purchase price, the price a person pays to own that factor indefinitely. Rental price, the price a person pays to use that factor for a limited period of time. The wage is the rental price of labor. The determination of the rental price is analogous to the determination of wages. How the rental price of land is determined. The market for land. Farms increase the quantity of land to rent until the value of the marginal product, VMPL, of land equals the land's rental price. The rental price of land adjusts to balance supply and demand for land. How the rental price of capital is determined. The market for capital. The farms increase the quantity of capital to rent until the value of the marginal product, VMPL, of capital equals the capital's rental price. The rental price of capital adjusts to balance supply and demand for capital. Rental and purchase price. Buying a unit of capital or land yields a stream of rental income. The rental income in any period equals the value of the marginal product, VMP. Hence, the equilibrium purchase price of a factor depends on both the current VMP and the VMP expected to prevail in future periods. Linkages among the factors of production. Factors of production are used together in a way that makes each factor's productivity dependent on the quantities of other factors. For example, an increase in the quantity of capital, the marginal product, and the rental price of capital fall. Having more capital makes workers more productive. MPL and W rise. Ask the expert, immigration. Unless they were compensated by others, many low skilled American workers would be substantially worse off if a large number of low skilled foreign workers were legally allowed to enter the US each year. 60% of economists disagree, 60% agree, 11% disagree, and 29% are uncertain. Conclusion. The neoclassical theory of income distribution. The theory developed in this chapter, the factor prices are determined by supply and demand. Each factor is paid the value of its marginal product. It is used by most economists as a starting point for understanding the distribution of income. Think, pair, and share. You are watching a debate about immigration on public television with a friend. The participants represent two camps, organized labor and corporate industry. Organized labor argues against open immigration, while U.S. industry argues in favor of more open immigration. Your friend says, I can't believe that these two groups can't get together on this issue. Both firms and workers join forces to produce our industrial output. I would think that their interests would be similar. Maybe a better arbitrator could help these groups find a position on immigration that would satisfy both groups. Number A, if there were open immigration, what would happen to the whole of the marginal product of labor and wage? Number B, if there were open immigration, what would happen to the value of the marginal product of capital and the land and their rental rates? Number C, are the positions that each group takes on immigration consistent with their interests? Explain. Is there likely to be a solution that satisfies both? Why or why not? Chapter in a nutshell. The economy's income is distributed in the market for the factors of production, labor, land, and capital. The demand for factors is a derived demand that comes from firms that use the factors to produce goods and services. Competitive, profit-maximizing firms hire each factor up to the point at which the value of the factor's marginal product equals its price. The supply of labor arises from individuals' trade-off between work and leisure. The price paid to each factor adjusts to balance the supply and demand for that factor. Because factor demand reflects the value of the marginal product of that factor, in equilibrium, each factor is compensated according to its marginal contribution to the production of goods and services. Because factors of production are used together, the marginal product of any one factor depends on the quantities of all factors that are available. As a result, a change in the supply of one factor alters the equilibrium earnings of all the factors.